right. So for my author discussion assignment, I chose to do mine on Amanda Gorman. Now, before I dive into more about Amanda Gorman, a little bit about her background, some of her work, I just wanted to kind of share the reason that I personally chose to, do my author discussion assignment about her. The reason being is for one, she's like, close in age to me, and she's accomplished so much, and I find that very, very inspiring. As well as I feel like she touches and addresses, and we'll get into this later on in the presentation, but she touches and addresses issues that are not only that I find interesting, but important issues that need attention, and also a lot of what she does and what she talks about, we can actually tie back into some of the material that we've learned throughout the course of this semester. So, without further ado, we're going to get into the background portion of the assignment. Okay, so Amanda Gorman is 24 years old. She was born in 1998. So, again, back to what I was just saying, she's a very young, very close in age to many of us students that are currently in university. She is a world renowned poet. She is known for her poetry and the work that she does in poetry. She graduated from Harvard University. Now, this is one of the facts that we're about to go over that I find very, very inspiring about Gorman. She was actually the youngest person in history that performed a poem at a US president's inauguration. And what's even crazy is she's 24 now, but at the time of the inaugural performance that she had, she was only 22 years old. Much of her work discusses societal issues that we face, such as racism, inequalities, injustices, things of that nature. Um, yeah, as you can see, although Gorman's very young, she has achieved a lot more than honestly a lot of people could achieve in a lifetime, which is super, super inspiring. Again, because she's so young and she still has so many more years ahead of her. So now, before we continue, I would like to discuss obviously some of Gorman's work, right? Um, the biggest one, the one that I personally enjoyed analyzing and listening to and reading, was Amanda Gorman's inaugural poem. So, like I said, she was the youngest person to ever perform an inaugural poem. So she performed in January of 2021 at President Biden's inauguration. The poem that she performed, it was a piece titled "The Hill We Climb." Um, I really liked this poem because I feel like it wasn't it wasn't fake and it was real. And what I mean by that is, as you can see in the poem, she discussed how we needed to come together as a country, as opposed to constantly bickering and fighting with one another. We should rather come together regardless of what we think, our opinions, things of that nature. And as we know, during this time period, especially with the 2020 election and the year 2020 itself, with COVID, Black Lives Matter, the emergence of the movement, and police brutality becoming a very, very big issue, especially in the year 2020. Um, I think her preaching unity uh, was very, very good and very, very important, especially for the time in which she performed this poem. Uh, Now, this is what I also like. And this is what I meant about my comment earlier about her being very, very real and realistic in her work. Um, Although she discussed how we need unity and we need to come together as a country, she also made sure to acknowledge our past and the history of our country in her poem. And I thought that was very powerful because it always, in a way, kind of bothers me when people kind of, you know, think like, oh, everything is good, everything's fine, we got to just come together, but not even address um, events in the past that kind of influence where we're at today as a society. And again, I really liked her call to action, which was talking about how we need to focus on a brighter future as opposed to focusing on what's already been done, aka the past. Um, Now, back to what I was saying in the beginning of the presentation, how I liked how we were able to, pull some of the stuff that in her work and tie it back to some of the material we've learned throughout the course of the semester. The biggest thing I think about, especially because, again, in a lot of her work, she talks about societal issues such as racism and injustices that we still see to this day. You could tie it back to, the Jim Crow era in America and how certain issues that we saw back then, although not as bad, still do exist, such as police brutality, such as racism, and things of that nature. So, again, this was a very, very well rounded poem. And even, uh, I remember during this time period when she gave her inaugural poem, the whole world was impressed. There wasn't one person that was like, no, she didn't touch on this subject. She didn't do this. She didn't do. No, everyone was very impressed with what she did. Okay, so now this piece of work that so Gorman again, she not only did the inaugural poem, the age of 22, she also made a poem for the Super Bowl. So in 2021, during the Super Bowl, the NFL actually named three honorary captains who were Tremaine Davis, who was a teacher, Susie Dormer, who was a healthcare worker, specifically an ICU manager, and James Martin, who served in the military. And these three were all honorary captains. So what they brought in Gorman to do was to make a poem kind of honoring and celebrating what these three individuals have like done. So the reason I like this piece of work was just the modernization aspect of her poem, um, specifically touching on the COVID-19 pandemic. Again, the biggest takeaway, like looking at Gorman's inaugural uh, performance, was she really focused on modern day issues and focused on the past, which was I thought was really cool. And again, in this piece of work, she focuses on modern times, aka the COVID pandemic. That's a big focus she had here. So she specifically talks about the sacrifices Davis made as a teacher, as well as all the sacrifice Dormer made as an ICU, nurse manager, right? As we all can remember, this was very recent, right? During when COVID was very, very bad and hospitals were overflown and teachers had to figure out Zoom and help out their students virtually. Both of these professions, along with essential workers, really had to make big time sacrifices, more sacrifices than the average person made in the pandemic to help better the lives of other people, which is very admirable and commendable. And I'm glad that in this piece of work, especially it being the Super Bowl and having the audience pool that it has, for her to point that out and I wouldn't say make people aware, but remind people because I'm sure everyone was well aware of the sacrifices teachers and um, healthcare workers made during this time. And in her poem, she also talks about James Martin, who served in the military, which I thought was really cool, just honoring the veterans and things of that nature. So again, the two biggest things I personally took away from researching Amanda Gorman and stuff, and the two things I personally like the most about her is the fact that she's very positive. However, she keeps it very, very the realism in her work is amazing because she really, really describes in an impactful and I guess good way of of getting the message across and really telling people how it is. And I think oftentimes, like I mentioned earlier, there's not enough of that. Rather, it's kind of like people are essentially afraid of addressing issues and to openly discussing certain issues, but she isn't. Rather, she brings attention and light to certain issues, which is very, very good. Okay, last but certainly not least, this is a short video I found on YouTube discussing how uh, Gorman was going to perform at the Super Bowl. Now, the reason I shared this video is because I kind of want to show how how electric it was, how electric Gorman's inaugural performance was, and show how excited people were to see that she was even getting another big time performance. So again, without further ado, we're going to go ahead and watch this.
Show at the U.S. presidential inauguration, youth poet Amanda Gorman will be in the spotlight once again at the Super Bowl. Gorman will recite an original poem before the game on February 7th. It'll highlight 3 honorary captains for the game: an educator, a nurse, and a veteran. They'll participate in the on-field coin toss before the kickoff. The league commissioner said they are being honored for their community leadership during the pandemic. At 22 years old, Gorman is the youngest presidential inaugural poet in United States history.
Okay, so as you can see, like with that short news clip,
Show.
how excited and how people were, just from the short clips of her performing at the inauguration, and how electric the environment was after she performed. Lastly, we got some works cited, some places where I found my information at. So the first website being Amanda Gorman's personal website, which I got some of her background information from. Then we have a CNBC article discussing her inaugural poem, where I got some of the information that we discussed. And then lastly, we have a USA Today article about the 3 people that she was honoring in her Super Bowl performance poem. All right. Well, with that being said, I think that again, Amanda Gorman has achieved a lot. She's very inspirational, and the aspect of realism within her poems is amazing, and is part of what makes her so great. Thank you for listening.